He demanded identification, dismissed her explanation outright, and cautioned her that refusal would exacerbate the situation, projecting authority as if the conclusion were already predetermined before any dialogue commenced. What he remained unaware of was that the woman he was accusing of unauthorized presence was a senior civil rights advocate with years of experience documenting impropriety and holding law enforcement officers accountable. And what he was entirely oblivious to was that this solitary encounter would be preserved, meticulously examined, and ultimately become the juncture at which his professional existence unraveled. Before we proceed, kindly indicate your geographical location of viewership and ensure you subscribe, as tomorrow's narrative is one you will not wish to miss. Maya Collins was 38 years of age, an attorney actively practicing with more than a decade of professional experience, and a principal partner at the legal firm whose address was displayed on the identification, now held within Officer Hargreaves' grasp. She had dedicated years to litigating matters involving unlawful confinement, improper searches, and the abuse of power, not in a theoretical capacity, but as a lived professional reality. And she had learned at an early stage that composed discernment was superior to volume when confronting entrenched authority. At this particular moment she was completing a routine duty connected to her office operations, unacquainted with the fact that this interaction would rigorously test all that she had assimilated throughout her career. Hargreaves, conversely, had cultivated a reputation for asserting dominance initially and posing inquiries subsequently. He possessed a documented predisposition for escalating minor occurrences into conflicts, frequently relying on conjecture rather than established fact, and internal grievances against him had been lodged on multiple occasions. Each instance the records were dismissed as matters of judgment or misunderstandings. That historical context informed his approach towards Maya, confident in his ability to manipulate the circumstances to his advantage. He examined her identification, inclined his head, and gave a derisive snort. "This does not appear authentic," he declared, disregarding the document in his possession without even a cursory glance at her credentials. Maya calmly reiterated her full appellation and professional standing, ensuring each utterance was deliberate. He interrupted her, maintaining that individuals frequently fabricated truths. She offered no defensive rejoinder. She rectified the statement once more, reasserted her qualifications, and waited. "Detach yourself from the vehicle and maintain your hands in plain view," he commanded. Maya inquired if she was being detained. "Not yet," he responded. "However, that status could be altered contingent upon your disposition." She maintained her composure. She understood that exhibiting emotional reactions would furnish him with an advantage, and she was unwilling to concede any such leverage. When she posed the question regarding which statute she was contravening, he reiterated that she was on private property and asserted that she lacked permission. Maya clarified that she had been granted authorization and had been utilizing this area for many years. Hargreaves dismissed her explanation, insisting that proving her assertion would be her responsibility, not his. She calmly requested if she could contact an associate from within the firm to corroborate her declaration. "That will not be requisite," he replied dismissively, confident that he required no corroboration. The tension escalated further. His discourse transitioned from inquiry to directive, and he began employing the honorific ma'am intermittently, a vocal indication that he was no longer inclined towards discussion, but towards control. He accused her of being uncooperative. She countered that she was fully compliant and was merely posing legitimate inquiries. His rejoinder, he disliked her tone. Maya recognized the established pattern because she had observed it from the opposing side of the courtroom. Steadfast opposition had previously been mischaracterized as insubordination. Authority had been exercised in ambiguous ways to legitimize escalation. She comprehended that every utterance could be recorded, transcribed, and subsequently subjected to scrutiny. She deliberately selected each word with meticulous care, cognizant that her restraint would possess greater potency than any form of altercation. As the exchange persisted, Hargreaves' exasperation intensified. Each occasion Maya calmly articulated her perspective. He repeated the same accusations, endeavoring to assert dominance. "You are fabricating a falsehood. Individuals such as yourself consistently deceive. he stated, as if reiterating the fallacious presumption would imbue it with veracity. Maya remained serene. She repeatedly corrected the record, restating her identity, her role, and her professional credibility. The officer advanced closer, intentionally diminishing the personal space between them. He stated that he could detain her until all matters were resolved, presenting the detention as a concession if she cooperated. Maya informed him that she did not consent to any detention without sufficient cause, i.e. the word consent caused a subtle alteration in his facial expression. He inquired where she acquired such a mode of expression. She replied simply, "Law school." He emitted a laugh, yet it lacked genuine amusement. It was incredulity hardened into disdain. Hargreaves had not factored in Maya's comprehension of the system unfolding around her. She was aware of the precise moment when his conduct transgressed from questionable to actionable. She knew which directives were being contravened, what benchmarks of review were applicable, and how every camera, every witness, and every radio transmission would align once a supervisor became involved. She also understood that this interaction was merely the commencement. Every minute added weight to what was already evolving into a documented transgression of authority. She stood immobile, composed, and resolute, compelling the situation to reveal its true nature. As Hargreaves transmitted her designation over the radio, his voice conveyed skepticism and a hint of defensiveness. He had presumed he would intimidate, coerce, and resolve the incident swiftly. However, Maya's calm professionalism served as a reflection of his own assumptions, mirroring back the absurdity of his actions. He could not reconcile the image of a composed, authoritative legal professional standing her ground with the prejudice that had informed his initial response. Maya's internal calculations were precise. She understood that if she permitted emotion to intrude, the encounter could escalate unnecessarily. She also knew that every infraction, every dismissive remark, and every misapplication of authority would strengthen her position once appropriate channels were engaged. She made mental notations of every word, every pause, every action. Comprehending that accountability would inevitably be established regardless of Hargreaves' intentions. And then, as the radio crackled and he spoke into it with evident frustration, Maya's gaze remained unwavering. She had prepared for such instances throughout her entire professional tenure. Years of advocacy, courtrooms, legal disputes, and meticulous documentation all converged into this serene yet unyielding presence. What Hargreaves failed to grasp was that he had already relinquished control. His authority, wielded so confidently in his own mind, was powerless against the methodical precision of an attorney trained in observation, legal procedure, and the art of holding power accountable. Maya Collins did not flinch, did not argue, did not raise her voice. She simply waited. She understood that the ensuing moments, though uncertain, would dictate the outcome, and she was prepared. And this was merely the beginning. Officer Daniel Hargreaves, still holding the radio receiver in close proximity, intensified his assertion of authority, insisting that the situation was under his command. I stated, "Step away from the vehicle," he repeated, his tone sharper this time, as if volume alone could compel compliance. Any non-compliance, and you will be immediately detained. His words, crisp and authoritative, carried the weight of the law he deemed absolute, disregarding every question, every correction, every measured word Maya Collins had offered. A brief, static-laced tone emanated from the body camera affixed to his uniform, capturing each exchange with mechanical exactitude. The recorder, impartial and unblinking, registered the tension in his voice and the deliberate stillness in hers. The documentation served as a silent testament to the escalation he did not realize was building against him. "You are impeding this investigation," he added, leaning forward slightly to assert dominance. Although Maya remained steadfast, her posture composed, her hands visible yet relaxed. "I require immediate responses, and you will provide them." Maya's reply was measured. "Officer, I am responding to every question. I have complied fully and sought clarification on the laws being applied." Each syllable was calm, each word precise, indicating that while she was cooperative, she was not intimidated. Hargreaves misinterpreted her patience as defiance. He shifted almost imperceptibly, positioning himself in a manner that restricted her movements. She observed this but did not react, aware that any attempt at physical resistance would grant him an advantage. He was attempting to establish dominance through proximity, tone, and insistence on obedience. Each directive he issued was intended to make her pause, hesitate, or reveal vulnerability. She did not. Hargreaves transmitted again, this time with greater volume, asserting that he was managing a potentially uncooperative individual. She claims to have authorization, but I do not find it credible. I am currently verifying credentials, he stated, projecting absolute authority as if no one could contradict him. The body camera recorded his every word without faltering. A nearby office worker approached the entrance, visible in the periphery of the camera's view. Their presence was subtle, marked by hesitant glances and inaudible murmurs, but it was noticed. Hargreaves registered the attention and adjusted his posture, his ego swelling as he assumed everyone was now observing his enforcement of order. "Ma'am, cease your movement," he commanded, his tone bordering on disdain. Maya disregarded the instruction to move. She continued to speak in measured, concise sentences. "I am fully compliant. I am posing only lawful questions. If there is a procedure I am expected to follow, kindly articulate it." Her confidence was quiet, precise, and professional, yet it unnerved him. Officers, by the nature of their training, are sensitive to hesitation. Her absence of hesitation disrupted the expectation upon which he relied to assert superiority. Another voice, a low whisper from a bystander, suggested that perhaps he was overreacting. Hargreaves turned abruptly, his eyes narrowing. He caught a glimpse of a phone being raised, recording silently. This subtle action elicited a faint flicker of annoyance. In his mind, he retained complete control, but the gaze of others now bore witness, and he responded with more forceful commands, louder, more definitive. "Step back. Move immediately, or you will be taken into custody." Maya remained motionless, allowing the words to register without emotional response. Her calmness contrasted with the officer's increasing agitation. Each observer, bystander, office worker, and recording phone added organic pressure. Hargreaves was accustomed to compliance. He had encountered challenges, certainly, but rarely in a manner that did not elicit visible fear or frustration. "Ma'am, cease speaking unless I address you," he barked, his voice rising fractionally. He was attempting to control not only her movements but her very presence. She responded not with anger but with clarity. "Officer, I am responding to your inquiries. I am providing the information you requested." Her tone suggested cooperation, but it carried its own authority, a subtle power that Hargreaves had not anticipated. Hargreaves's pattern, previously noted in internal records, was now surfacing. Complaints had been filed by citizens alleging that he unnecessarily escalated minor issues, that he exceeded his authority, and that he presumed guilt prior to evidence. No internal review had curbed this behavior. That history, now observable in real time, was influencing his decisions. He was following the same established patterns. Assumption, insistence, projection of control, all while disregarding clear indications that his subject was not intimidated. A colleague of Maya's from her firm appeared briefly, partially visible through a glass door, speaking softly. "Is everything all right?" Their hesitation and whisper suggested concern, but they were careful not to overstep. The moment served as a subtle reminder that Hargreaves's actions were no longer private. People were observing, recording, noticing. His need for control clashed with the expanding audience. "Officer," Maya stated, her voice steady, "if you require verification of my status or authority here, you may contact my office. I am fully authorized to be present." She remained composed, her hands visible, her posture firm. Her words were professional, calm, and deliberate, each one a subtle challenge to his assumed power. He ignored the offer, interpreting it as defiance. I stated, "Step away now." His tone sharpened, authority weaponized in every syllable, each second of hesitation in his mind justifying a more forceful response. Maya's replies, however, contained subtle indicators that something was not as it appeared. She referenced her adherence to protocol, spoke with unwavering composure, and responded to threats of detention with legal precision. Although Hargreaves could not yet ascertain it, Her every word and action hinted that the power dynamic could shift. The quiet discipline of her demeanor was a seed of disruption he could not perceive. Other observers adjusted their positions, phones raised, some whispered, others froze mid-stride. The growing attention organically intensified the tension, as if the city itself were watching. Hargreaves noticed, but he interpreted the attention as validation of his authority, not as a threat. He requested backup, asserting that a potentially uncooperative individual required additional support. The mere act of radioing for assistance, however, signaled something he failed to recognize. Every call for backup, every reference to protocol, made the encounter more public, more documented, and more irreversible. Bystanders and colleagues alike registered the insistence, the pressure, the imbalance. Maya did not panic. She maintained her composure, providing concise, factual responses. Each observer could discern the contrast, his aggression, her controlled professionalism. Hargreaves's confidence in his complete control began to fracture imperceptibly as subtle cues undermined his authority in ways he could not immediately quantify. A brief, sharp sound from a nearby phone confirmed someone was recording, a fact he noted but disregarded. In reality, every act of documentation was a piece of evidence he was accumulating against himself, though he did not yet comprehend it. At the moment a name was mentioned, her full name, perhaps in conversation among observers or over the radio. Hargreaves hesitated, the first sign of doubt flickering across his features. The pause was brief but revealing. He glanced around, surveying the witnesses, scanning the documentation. The notion that his control might no longer be absolute registered, subtly but undeniably. That was the moment the officer realized this situation was no longer under his command. A brief silence fell over the interaction, punctuated by the faint hum of the body camera. Hargreaves' voice, once commanding, faltered mid-command. The pause stretched just long enough for the subtle shift to register uncertainty. His eyes flickered to the phone in his hand, then toward Maya Collins's figure. Every muscle in his stance stiffened as he processed the disparity between his assumption and the reality. The camera's red recording light captured the stillness, unblinking, as if aware that something decisive was about to unfold. Then it happened. A call came through the officer's radio. The dispatcher's tone was official, calm, and factual. Officer Hargreaves, the individual you are detaining, is listed as a partner and registered attorney at Collins Associates. Verification confirmed. Badge and ID match official records. Hargreaves's grip on the radio loosened slightly. He blinked, repeating the name quietly under his breath, as if attempting to reconcile it with the person he had been confronting. His previous assumptions unraveled silently. He had believed compliance would be straightforward, domination unquestionable. Now the facts collided with his preconceptions. Another voice chimed in over the radio, equally calm, confirming all credentials verified. No further action required, unless directed. The factual tone, devoid of drama or judgment, carried significant weight. Hargreaves's role as enforcer no longer applied. The authority vested in the records and the verification completely eclipsed him. Subtle changes in his posture were immediate. His shoulders dropped fractionally. The sharpness in his tone softened to a question. The commands he had issued transformed into tentative suggestions. He glanced at Maya, hesitation evident, and spoke almost inaudibly. You are authorized." Maya's response was simple. She handed over a card from her office. "Professional, concise. Verified by my office," she stated. Her words carried no triumph, no gloating. Every syllable was calm and factual. She did not raise her voice. She did not gesture unnecessarily, and she did not avert her gaze from him as she confirmed her authority. The facts themselves delivered the impact. The witnesses reacted instantly, subtly, but observably. The office worker who had been whispering earlier straightened, nodding slightly. A bystander, still recording, lowered their phone, whispering to another, She's a lawyer." The secondary officer, who had arrived at Hargreaves's request, paused, a silent acknowledgement passing between them without the need for commentary. Their reactions objectively reinforced the truth, confirming that the authority presented in the documentation was absolute. Hargreaves's tone continued to shift. Each command he had issued moments before was now replaced by softer phrasing, requests rather than demands. He stepped back slightly, unconsciously creating distance. His voice, once rigid and unyielding, now faltered when directed at Maya. I see. I will await instructions. Internally, he understood the ramifications even before any report would be filed. He swallowed against the sudden realization of how far he had overstepped. Every decision, every misstep, every escalation from mere moments ago now stood in stark contrast to the verified facts confirming Maya's authority. The quiet understanding hit him with the weight of accountability. He would not mock. He would not argue. Internally, the gravity of the misjudgment was immense. Maya remained still. She did not raise her voice. She did not offer corrections beyond what was necessary. She did not move unnecessarily. The authority she commanded was not in the volume of her response, but in the precision and calm certainty of her demeanor. Every moment underscored that power could be asserted without aggression, without overt confrontation. The juxtaposition between her restraint and Hargreaves's faltering commands highlighted the shift. In short sentences, the reactions around them were marked. The observer whispering into a phone said only, "It's official." Another murmured, "She's the partner." Even the secondary officer, standing silently to the side, offered a subtle nod, a quiet confirmation that the facts fully aligned with her authority. No commentary, no exaggeration, only an acknowledgement of verified truth. Hargreaves's gaze moved between the witnesses and Maya, his mental calculations racing. Each silent acknowledgement, each subtle confirmation intensified the shift in power. His confidence, once absolute, had collapsed into cautious observation, the kind reserved for an individual over whom he could no longer assert authority. The commands that had once flowed effortlessly now seemed irrelevant, unnecessary, and potentially damaging if spoken further. Maya, aware of the subtle shift, maintained her posture. She displayed no overt signs of control or triumphant satisfaction. Every subtle movement was executed with precision, a mark of professionalism and self-possession. Even as the power dynamic had irrevocably shifted, she refrained from leveraging the situation verbally. Her authority was rooted in her deliberate restraint, adherence to protocol, and the irrefutable facts that substantiated her standing. The body-worn camera diligently captured each instance of deliberation, every minute alteration in vocal inflection, every deliberately paused directive. It silently documented the complete turnaround, allowing objective reality to assert itself. Officer Hargreaves's subsequent actions were now being characterized not as law enforcement, but as a critical misjudgment. The evidence of his overreach was immediately and unmistakably apparent. When Hargreaves spoke again, his words were carefully chosen and deliberate. He calmly requested direction and sought confirmation through alternative communication channels, abandoning any reliance on assumption. The transition was absolute. The officer, who had commenced the encounter with an air of dominance and assurance, now adopted a posture of observation, attentive listening, and deference. The prevailing circumstances themselves dictated the course of the interaction, and he complied. The onlookers, now clearly perceiving the truth of the situation, began to acknowledge it. The hushed discussions among office staff, the approving nods from those passing by, and the subtle adjustments made by the secondary officer all served to reinforce the emergent reality. There was no need for an overt announcement of the revelation. The facts had spoken for themselves. In the ensuing moments, Hargreaves's internal reflections revealed a quiet comprehension of the ramifications. He understood that an internal review, a demand for accountability, and likely formal disciplinary measures awaited him. The impact of his conduct was undeniable, yet this understanding was reached without vocalization. The repercussions did not require verbal articulation. The collected evidence, the confirmations received, and the visibly altered balance of authority conveyed everything. Maya, maintaining her professional demeanor and composure, allowed the objective facts to convey the narrative. Her presence, her controlled conduct, and her substantiated authority facilitated a natural resolution to the imbalance without resorting to any form of confrontation. The stark contrast between her steady assurance and Hargreaves's wavering assertiveness made the reversal of authority unequivocally clear to any observer. By the time the unblinking red indicator of the body camera continued its recording, the transformation had been fully completed. Hargreaves's bearing, tone, and overall approach had undergone a complete metamorphosis. He was no longer issuing commands, but speaking with caution. He was no longer in charge, but acutely aware of his limitations. The Internal Affairs Department would be apprised of the situation later that very same afternoon. The recording device did not cease its operation. By the following morning, official reports and documentation had already begun to circulate through the appropriate channels. The repercussions were imminent, though not yet fully resolved, leaving the unfolding situation poised on the brink of definitive accountability. Following the validation of Maya Collins's credentials, the internal review procedure was initiated without delay. Supervising officers formally documented every phase of the encounter. Statements were obtained from Officer Hargreaves, Maya Collins, and the involved witnesses, and these were then cross-referenced against the body camera footage. The supervisor overseeing the incident specifically highlighted instances of procedural deviation, emphasizing the departure from established enforcement protocols. Every recorded action, every statement made, and every observation time-stamped was officially entered into the chain of command, ensuring that accountability was maintained across multiple organizational tiers. The footage captured by Hargreaves's body camera was independently scrutinized by internal affairs personnel. Each command issued, each moment of hesitation, and every interaction was meticulously analyzed against departmental policy. The confirmation of Maya Collins' legitimate authority, juxtaposed with Hargreaves's refusal to acknowledge official documentation in real time, was flagged as a significant infraction of protocol. A formal report detailing these findings was forwarded to senior leadership, citing procedural violations, a lapse in maintaining professional conduct, and the inappropriate exercise of authority during a public interaction. Additional accounts from office personnel, bystanders, and the secondary officer were corroborated by the recorded evidence. Each testimony confirmed that Hargreaves had escalated the situation unnecessarily, disregarded lawful explanations, and failed to exercise reasonable discretion. The documentation process prioritized absolute accuracy, relying exclusively on factual corroboration, rather than subjective opinion or interpretation. The objective facts themselves dictated the subsequent course of action. Administrative measures were enacted immediately upon the conclusion of the review. Officer Hargreaves was placed on immediate administrative leave pending a comprehensive investigation. Internal communications detailed the specific reasons for this action, including repeated procedural failures, an overreach of his granted authority, and a pattern of behavior consistent with previous complaints. The established chain of command adhered to existing policy for cases involving substantiated misuse of authority, ensuring that any response was based on formal procedure rather than personal judgment. Hargreaves's personnel file, which contained records of prior documented complaints, was reviewed in determining the appropriate next steps. Recommendations for his dismissal were prepared, emphasizing his repeated escalation of situations, his refusal to properly verify credentials, and his disregard for verified professional authority. The procedural review concluded that such conduct could not be tolerated without significant institutional repercussions. Pending final authorization, his removal from active duty was officially approved, ensuring the department's commitment to maintaining professional integrity. Maya Collins resumed her professional responsibilities with her characteristic composure. She issued no public statements, expressed no exultation, and actively avoided any form of confrontation. Her unwavering adherence to professional standards throughout the encounter remained consistent. She continued to fulfill her role as a partner in her law firm, maintaining her focus on her clients and her legal obligations. Her supervisors commended her calm and measured approach when faced with pressure, citing it as exemplary conduct and reinforcing the established professional standards for navigating confrontational scenarios. Official communications were dispatched to oversight bodies, confirming that the incident had undergone a thorough review. policy advisories were distributed to all law enforcement personnel, emphasizing the imperative of verifying credentials, adhering strictly to established procedures, and exercising restraint during interactions with the public. The documentation underscored the fundamental principle that compliance with verified authority is obligatory and that procedural overreach would not be countenanced. By the end of that day, Hargreaves's suspension had been formally codified. The administrative review recommended termination, and preliminary documentation for his separation from employment was drafted. Public records confirmed the officer's removal from his position, citing instances of misconduct, a failure to follow verified protocols, and the improper application of his authority. The consequences were presented as standard institutional action, factual and impartial, devoid of any sensationalism. Media outlets reported on the verified facts of the incident. Articles substantiated Maya Collins's professional standing, detailed the procedural review process, and confirmed the officer's administrative suspension. The reports concentrated on documentation, accountability, and the adherence to verified authority, rather than dramatizing the event. Public discourse focused on compliance with professional verification procedures, the importance of following established protocols, and the institutional response to the situation. The coverage remained factual, thereby bolstering the credibility of the resolution. Internal communications within law enforcement departments confirmed that training modules would be updated. Officers were reminded of the critical importance of body camera evidence, the necessity of proper identification verification, and strict adherence to procedural guidelines when engaging with verified professionals. The corrective measures implemented were procedural and fact-based, emphasizing a systemic reinforcement of accountability and adherence to established standards. Hargreaves's professional reputation within the department suffered irreparable damage. The documented record of repeated procedural failures, coupled with the public confirmation of professional authority he had disregarded, positioned him for formal disciplinary action. Each record highlighted patterns consistent with previous complaints. Termination was deemed consistent with institutional standards for repeated misconduct. The facts that were recorded and subsequently reviewed dictated the outcome without any subjective influence. Maya's professional conduct remained a central element of the official record. Reports emphasized her restraint, her adherence to established procedures, and her precise verification of credentials. Her calm, controlled responses under pressure were lauded as exemplary, vividly demonstrating how authority can be effectively maintained through professionalism rather than confrontation. The verified facts alone carried substantial weight. Secondary officers, witnesses, and administrative personnel contributed to the official record. Their statements were concise, supported by video evidence, and aligned precisely with departmental procedures. This corroboration affirmed that procedural integrity had been upheld by all parties involved, with the sole exception of the officer in question. The evidence, being factual and verifiable, provided a solid basis for both the institutional review and the subsequent administrative actions taken. Institutional responses included a comprehensive policy review. Oversight bodies confirmed that the verification of professional authority was a mandatory requirement. Any deviation from this, particularly when involving confirmed credentials, constituted sufficient grounds for immediate administrative action. The recorded encounter was subsequently integrated into training materials, serving to underscore the importance of verification, restraint, and accountability. The documentation process remained factual, process-oriented, and dedicated to reinforcing established standards. By the conclusion of the review process, Maya had returned to her professional duties without any alteration to her standing. Her verified authority and her composed demeanor under scrutiny were noted as exemplary. She continued her practice of law as a partner, underscoring the significance of adhering to protocol, maintaining professionalism, and exercising calm authority during challenging situations. The repercussions for Hargreaves were formal and definitive. His suspension was put into effect, termination was recommended, and institutional oversight was reinforced. The process of documentation, reporting, and verification established the accountability framework in accordance with established policy. Step by step, the system functioned as intended to rectify the misuse of authority, enforce accountability, and preserve institutional integrity. Public records and internal reports serve as confirmation of the outcome. The footage has been archived for the purpose of transparency. Supervisors noted that the corrective measures implemented were fully consistent with departmental standards and ensured adherence to procedural compliance. The officer's authority was effectively rescinded, and his professional standing was irrevocably altered due to his documented misconduct. The institutional process clearly demonstrated that verified facts and strict adherence to policy are the determinants of outcomes. By the following morning, all pertinent reports, reviews, and internal communications had been finalized. Policy reminders were disseminated throughout the department, strongly emphasizing verification, compliance, and restraint. The system had effectively functioned to address instances of misused authority and to enforce accountability, leaving behind a clear factual record for future reference. If you believe that accountability should extend to everyone, irrespective of their official capacity, please ensure you subscribe for more stories of this nature.